Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fireside Chat number 22 with our special guest, Dean Esmay. Hi, Dean. How are you?
Hey, fine. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm good, thank you. Okay, so we're just going to, talk a little bit about who you are and what you do. We've had lots of different kinds of people on, and just maybe, we'll see where the conversation goes. It's just going to be us talking and having a little chit chat. So, I guess we should probably start with who you are. So, as I understand it, I got involved with the Honey Badgers about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. So I haven't been doing this thing very long. But from what the kind of things that I've run into online, especially on YouTube and on Voice for Men, is that you've been doing this a long time. Your name is one of the names that comes up really frequently. So I would consider, and some others have considered, that you were kind of a veteran of this whole Voice for Men MRM thing. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to take an interest in men's rights?
Well, I mean, I started getting an interest in these in gender issues and all that all the way back to the 80s, actually. I guess I'm an old guy compared to most people in the movement these days. Used to do volunteer work for the Domestic Abuse Hotline for Men and Women, which is gone now. Stop Abusive in Violent Environments, which is the only direct male advocacy group that lobbies Hollywood, the lobbies Washington, D.C. On men's issues. They don't say they're doing men's issues, but they effectively are, because they know men are the overwhelming majority of the underserved. So they Stop Abusive Environments. You can Google them out now. They're still doing that. They still lobby in Washington. They get no support, of course, which is kind of why I eventually got involved in A Voice for Men and took on the MRA logo, which sometimes I'm thinking about dropping. I have been thinking about dropping, although I may compromise. I think I may compromise, but I took on that label because it was a hated label, and I saw the hatred, the unhinged, irrational criticism, the incoherent criticism of the feminist establishment, and to a large degree the conservative establishment in the United States, and that I also see abroad. So I always knew it wasn't just feminism. And by the way, I'm a very traditional guy. You can't be Catholic and not be real traditional, at least not a very good Catholic. But there's certain things that I would call dysfunctional or unreasonable traditionalism that conservatives tend to push on men, young men in particular, that I think are equally toxic in the long run, even if they sound shorter. So I took on the MRA label, knowing it would make me a contrarian, and I became the managing editor of A Voice for Men, which I did for several years. And I'll go ahead and be honest, I something like quintupled the traffic of the site while I was there. Now, that wasn't just me. That was work of other people, including people I brought in, people I did not bring in, but that were already in, but that I kind of tried to get on board. One of those was Allison Tiemann. Allison and I'm amazed more people don't know, but Allison and I worked together for a while. She was an editor at AVFM for a while, and then probably more importantly, at least for this audience, is that we started the first MRA-friendly podcast, I think, on geek issues and red pill issues. It's called Tales from the Infrared. Allison and I co-created that and ran it for a while. Then she moved on, and then other people moved on. I'm not sure. I've moved on from it. I'm not sure where it is now, but I've been deeply enmeshed in geek culture my whole life. My interest in men's issues came later. So
yeah, well, Tales from the Infrared they still do it, and it's I think they do it every Monday or something like that, or at least they were for a while there. So if you guys should look it up.
Yeah,
they have pretty good shows, and I think I've
actually
been.
It's on Paul Elam's channel. And that's where all the A Voice for Men video content goes. And yeah, no, I mean, I really think of as Tales from the Infrared as the one that inspired Allison. Maybe she can ask, but inspired her. I want to do that. She didn't we weren't great creative partners, I think. We just kind of had some friction. But if creative, I mean. But whatever. We started, I think that gave her the idea, because she went straight to create Honey Badger, and a geek podcast of our own. And I think that's really cool. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it started on AVFM. It's been a couple years now, but and I've just maintained a steady, strong interest in the movement. I left AVFM about a year ago. I was severely injured, nearly died actually, but I'm better now for the most part. And now I've been writing on my blog. My blog, I guess if we're talking about my past, my blog used to be one of the most popular blogs on the internet. We used to do calls with the White House. Actually, we used to get updates from the Pentagon, writing on war issues.
Wow.
We went to the Republican National Convention and had some coverage of that on there. Eventually, I shut it down because blogs and blogging changed. I didn't like it anymore, and I did not like the political direction the country was going in anymore. So I quit, and that's what got me into men's issues. But I'm back to writing on Dean's World. That's why I mentioned it. DeanEsmay.com. I'm writing. Just be aware, I'm writing mostly on men's issues from a religious perspective now.
Okay. Now, when you say you were writing on your blog, and it was a really big blog up and with the Pentagon and the White House and stuff. When was this? Like around what period are we talking about?
I started my blog right after 9/11, which a lot of people did. But I never stopped. Well, I stopped about 6 years ago, I think. Started it back up for real about 3-4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I started blogging in 2000, early 2002, formally. Before then, I used to hang out on listservs. So I've been a writer for a long time, and that's actually what I'm better at, is being a writer than anything else, podcasts or videos. No, I'm a writer first and foremost.
Yeah. Was blogging really, and I mean not just different politically, but I mean like just in terms of scope, was blogging really different in around that time? Because I'm
Oh yeah,
I'm in my 40s, but I didn't really get into the internet really big until I don't know, like around 2001. But even then, I wasn't blogging or anything like that, so I don't know how much it had changed.
It changed a lot because the internet was so much smaller then, and when they invented blogging technology, I mean, it seems so obvious now because with all the tech we have, but back then it was rather revolutionary. You could just write an entire article and hit publish, and it would be formatted and published and posted, and people could get to it. That was really revolutionary. Before that, you had to code things in HTML, which I actually used to do. I would write opinion pieces and code them in HTML to put them on the internet. Of course, no one read them. And so in that when the blogs first started, when the software showed up, there weren't that many of us.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knew everybody. And actually, we had a major impact, as I remember it, on Google and the other search engines, because almost on accident, we invented things like what they call the Google bomb. Probably nobody knows that anymore.
Google gone.
Bomb, B-O-M-B.
Oh, Google bomb. Okay.
Yeah, you used to be able to do like fuck with the trick words just by writing things on your blogs and linking them a certain way, and you could watch in real time as you were manipulating Google when you did that for other people's search results. They obviously made an effort to make that stop, but oh yeah, I think in its heyday, Dean's World was doing about 20,000 visits, maybe about 100,000 hits a day in its heyday, which was a lot for that day. I don't know if that's actually still pretty good, I think. But now it's much smaller because I shut it down. I didn't want to do it, but yeah, it was really different. So, but I mean, I know names from that period, right? Glenn Reynolds, the Instapundit. We're acquaintances, not good friends, but we know each other through that. Protein Wisdom. You'll notice a lot of these are right wingers because I ran in right wing circles for a long time. Captain's Quarters, Ed Morrissey. We don't get along that well anymore, but. Pajamas Media, the whole Pajamas Media empire. Hell, I used to write for Pajamas Media. If you've heard of those guys, but and I knew most of those guys: Bill Whittle, Steve Green.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, quite knew him. Michelle Malkin. Actually, was I kind of ended vlogging when I got into a public spat with Michelle Malkin, but and sadly enough, it's. Some of it was over issues that the manosphere is fighting over today, and I don't know what's ever going to stop those.
Yeah, I wonder. I think I'd like to try to get somebody like Bill Whittle on for a fireside chat. I'm curious about his thoughts on like I don't know, the MRM and like the culture wars and stuff. But
I can virtually guarantee he wouldn't like it, but because
that's
one of those conservatives who has that sort of man up chivalry thing going, which he won't. Bill Whittle, if you're listening, you're not giving realistic expectations for your son's son, and that's damaging the country. Hope you hear me. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that would be the reason why I'm curious. I'd like to get like that kind of a conservative on, just to get that other end, because we've had like Kevin Logan on, and we've had the skeptic feminists on, and you know, so we're just, I don't know, like just like to hear what people's thoughts are, get their arguments, see, you know, I don't know where their head is at. Okay, so yeah, no, that's all. So this sounds like you have a great deal of experience with this stuff, going back a long way. What do you do? Because I mean, this is just what you do because it's your passion, right? Or at least one of your passions. Like, what do you do for a living? And does that bring you the same kind of satisfaction?
Actually, I want to get one more thing out, because I'm getting really tired of hearing that we don't do anything as men's rights activists. I need people to know that, you know, not only have I and others I work with lobbied state officials, court officials, government officials. I have personally gotten innocent men out of jail. I have personally gotten guilty false accusers put away. I have done these things. So when I hear somebody, and I'll even call, I don't know if you'll ever hear this, Sergeant of Akkad, you tell me I don't do anything? Talk to me about what I do sometime. Yeah, no, we do things as MRAs. I also work with National Coalition for Men and the Anti-Misandry Forum. So.
Oh, yeah. When you say that you got like false accusers put away, is that what? Tell me, what are the penalties for? Because we don't, like, for example, just recently, Kesha just tried to accuse someone of sexually assaulting her or raping her 10 years ago because she was trying to get out of some contract thing. And I mean, they're obviously the jury's still out as to whether or not something had actually happened. But I expressed a great deal of cynicism on the last show where we were talking about it, because it all just smells so fishy, no pun intended, considering we're talking about Kesha. So I'm just curious, what would the actual you know, what, at least with what you did, what were the actual ramifications or penalties be for a false accuser from what you experienced?
What is typical for a false accuser from what I've seen is that if you're really lucky, she'll spend the night in jail. Most likely she'll cry and get a finger wagging. The woman I helped put away, Tiffany Marie Smith, we didn't manage to get her in jail until her 11th proven false allegation. And I'll send you the links to that if you want. Most false accusers don't get shit. And generally speaking, if you want them to get shit, the only thing you can hope to do is embarrass them, because the system will rarely prosecute them. We've been screaming that for years and alerting the public to that for years and having them pat us on the head about it. Now, finally, the last 2 or 3 years, we're starting to see stuff like the UVA rape hoax and that horrible actress who falsely accused that man that my friend Aaron Pitsy got out of jail. Sawad Fares, the actress who falsely accused a man. The only thing they get is public appropriation. But since most false accusers are narcissists or sociopaths, the one thing they fear is being embarrassed. So embarrassing them is usually the way to go about it. At least until the system begins to recognize that this issue is real and pressing and huge. I just wrote a long article, which of course has some of the, you know, right-wing nut Catholic haters out there upset, but talking about the serious issue with false allegations of rape at Catholic priests. And documented multiple cases of false allegations of these men who, just like MRAs, by the way, work under a presumption of guilt because you say Catholic and the jokes come out. And, you know, from my perspective, especially as a Catholic, I'm sick of those jokes. They're ignorant and stupid. The woman who, Sabrina Rubin Erderly, the one who gave us the UVA rape hoax, also was personally responsible for helping get 2 Catholic priests and a Catholic school teacher who were completely and obviously innocent put in jail. One of them died. The culture of false allegations has been thick for at least a decade, if not longer. I think actually if you go into the false allegations issue, you'll find that it's a historical perennial. And sometimes it's about race issues, sometimes it's not. But in any case, what it really is, and this is something I know Allison would appreciate, what really goes on whenever you have a culture of false allegations like this, you pick a man, a type of man, you have decided is the other. Maybe he's the black man, maybe he's the Jew, maybe he's the Catholic, because by the way, this country, the United States, has a long history of lynching and tormenting and slandering Catholics. It's a real thing. It's not anybody out there whining, it's SJW, SJW. No, racism is real. Religious bigotry is real. These things are real. And they're serious and pressing. It's why Catholics and other Orthodox Christians, not evangelicals that you think you know, but Orthodox Christians over in Africa are being slaughtered. And they're mostly Christian men. And this is one of the reasons why within the MRM right now these days, I've had enough of the Christian bashing. In a big way, I've had enough. I don't hang out anymore within the MRM with people who indulge in Christian bashing, especially Catholic bashing. And it's just a line I've drawn in the sand, and it's made me unpopular, but I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
So, and actually, if you're interested in that topic, I am writing a book, because one of my theses is that the entire men's rights movement has been sucking atheist dick too long. And I mean that in a real serious way. Ideological atheists, who are very much a minority still, have privileged themselves in the wider culture and also within the men's rights movement, so that we get to auto-assume their assumptions about the universe as correct and scientific, and everybody else is just voodoo and witchcraft. And that, sir, is intellectual bigotry of the worst sort. And it's not true. It's not a narrative you can sustain. Intellectually, atheism itself is not a coherent position. Neither is skepticism, by the way. They're both fundamentally intellectually incoherent and frequently dishonest. And I think I started coming to that, and people are accusing me of ranting. No, these are strong, firm, principled opinions. Atheists, the online atheist community has repeatedly shown it won't do shit about these issues. It would rather hear them from a woman, and even when it hears and listens to a woman, they don't do anything. And they still indulge in attacks on MRAs, they don't even talk to. I think the last time I turned it off was when I heard yet another one making fun of us and saying all we do is whine. Who doesn't know anything about us? Or who knows better than that? And they accuse us of not doing things. And then but they don't talk to us to ask us what we've done, as if we have to go to them and prove things. Personally, as a men's rights activist, I'm going to be concentrating the next year or two, at least in my activism, on talking to people who aren't atheists. Because I have found that on the whole, while the one or two, I know some atheists that I love, like Karen, although she's dumb on religion. Love you, Karen. I'm not going to talk to any more atheists. If somebody tells me they're an atheist, I'm going to assume, okay, you're a shallow asshole and probably a bigot. I'll go find somebody religious. They tend to be more honest people. And they tend to actually do things. And what I'm writing is a book called Letter to a Heathen Nation. That is a book that is a response to men that I feel are responsible for the current state of affairs that we're in with the social justice warrior crowd, because they started it. They can talk all they like about how, no, we're for freedom of expression and all that. I'm sorry, that's rooted in the Western Christian values you threw away and that you shit on. That's how I feel whenever I listen to shallow men like Richard Dawkins. He put himself there. It's not right that he's being censored, but he started the culture of intellectual intolerance that the social justice cult has grown into. This has been growing for a couple of decades now, going at least back to the 90s. Atheists privileging their view as if it is automatically the rational one, and it is not. And acting like everybody else is a loony or a cultist if they reject atheism, which they should, by the way, because atheism is incoherent. It's time that atheists and the kind of bigots who love Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Bill Maher, Penn Jillette, I know all their work well. These are shallow men who get by using weasel-worded straw manning and question begging to horrifically demonize people of faith. And they like nothing better, by the way, than to bash the Catholic Church more than any other Christian denomination. And almost all they have to say about it are vicious, hateful, easily debunked lies that are religious bigotry, no different than religious bigotry toward Jews or blacks. In fact, the next time I hear some Englishman use the Catholic Church, shit on the Catholic Church as an insult, you're the Catholic Church, I'm just going to assume, well, basically, whenever I hear that, whenever I hear somebody shitting on the body of Christ like that, which is what we believe we are, what I think is, well, basically, your IQ went down and your jackass points went up because you invariably don't know what you're talking about. And you'll defend things that are libelous slanders about the church without hesitation. And then what they'll do is, when you defend it, they'll dismiss your point of view because you're Catholic, which is like dismissing your point of view because you're an MRA. In fact, I would say to the MRAs who have sat around talking about how the press gets us wrong, people smear us, people lie us, they call us losers, they say this, they say we want to rape, they want to beat, we want to oppress. Welcome to the Catholic Church, because they've been lying about us like that since Henry VIII. And so, and I want to educate people so that they know what the truth of it is of this faith. Science, you have the church to thank for that. It was the cradle of Western civilization and what science came out of for 1600 years. Creationism, why are you bothering us with creationism? St. Augustine punctured creationists 1600 years ago. And why are people acting like this church, which has nonstop been a sponsor of the sciences for countless centuries and still is one, pretending that that is the enemy of science? That's a culture of intolerance and ignorance. And that's why I'm writing the book. It is going to be for the men's rights audience. It's going to be for the atheist skeptic community. And it's going to be a call out for people of faith to recognize, A, there's no way the secular society is going to do anything. Certainly not the atheist skeptic community. Shit, I personally raised $10,000 for Ben Radford of the atheist skeptic community in his false allegation suit. Didn't even get a thanks from the motherfucker. Why do I care anymore what the so-called atheist skeptic community thinks, except that everybody's all excited by people like Sargon, who treat us like second thoughts and still want to pat us on the head. And I actually am one of those people who thinks none of these problems with feminism or the social justice cult, and the social justice cult is an atheist cult, just like Ayn Rand's objectivist atheist bullshit, and just like Marx is an atheist cult. The four horsemen, they started this movement of atheism. They're cult leaders who've made us stupider and more ignorant and more harsh and more uncaring and more unjust to each other than any time I can remember in my life. And I do believe the atheist community needs to own its part of that, because they've had a big part in it.
So I got a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm genuinely curious. You were talking about the skepticism. You were being critical of skepticism, and I wanted you to expand on that, like what the issues are with it. I'm curious about the arguments, because I've never honestly never really heard that before, and I'm genuinely curious about where the flaws are in skepticism, or at least maybe it's not the practice, but rather the culture surrounding it. I don't know.
Well,
so
both,
could
actually.
you enlighten me on that?
Yeah, both of them. Some of this, it goes to what you would call epistemology, I suppose. What do the words you mean actually mean, right? Which is always a thorny subject. But skepticism as a form of philosophy is really very simple. You look at a thing and you start with the assumption that it must be false, and you continually try to disprove it, and if you can't disprove it, you assume it's true. That is a process of finding things out. It is not the only process of finding things out, but notice, every time you say you're being skeptical, you are assuming the falseness of the proposition. That's not always the best way to go. I can tie any atheist into a knot trying to defend his atheism. Like skepticism, atheism is logically incoherent and can be shown to be such easily. It amazes me, so many Christians, I hate to do it, but I blame the evangelicals. They're so bad at defending their logical arguments that ideological atheists will run to these fundamentalists, hear the most batshit stupid, shallow answers, and they'll say, see, that's the Christian response. In the meantime, those of us who are educated, thoughtful, scientific, learned, logical people are just cringing. We can't believe these, like Dwayne Gish is getting away with this shit. And maybe you've never heard the Christian talk like this, but I was talking to some of my Catholic friends, praying over it before the show, and they kind of agreed with me. It's like Christians need to start opening their mouths again, and I mean the real Christians, not the Ralph Reeds and the Pat Robertsons, the real ones, especially as Catholics. Hello? Yeah, hello?
No, I dropped for just a half second.
As Catholics, we're heir to a 1,500-year-old, the richest tradition in philosophy, science, and ethics possibly known to man. So if you're concerned about Western civilization, I've got some books for you to read, which will start with, even if you're an atheist or an agnostic, having some respect again for organized religion. Because I truly believe most of our religious problems are caused by people who pick up a Bible and say, I can read this for myself. To which the answer is any Western Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox Christian will say, that's insanity. You can't do that. But I'm sorry, I'm ranting. Getting back to your point, skepticism walks in always assuming the falseness of a proposition, and what you wind up doing is you start using Occam's razor. By the way, Occam's razor is not a scientific principle. Occam's razor all by itself is a scientific tool of convenience. It's not a law. Find anybody who'll say it's a law. But what you're doing is you're taking Occam's razor and you're taking everything you think is wrong and chopping it away.
Real quick, for people who don't know what Occam's razor is, would you explain that?
Occam's razor, simply put, it is elegant thinking, and it can be very useful, especially in a scientific experiment. There's different ways of putting Occam's razor, but Occam's razor is essentially all things being equal, the simplest explanation tends to be the correct one when you see an explanation. And it's probably phrased better as parsimony, which means make as few assumptions as you can and to arrive at a result. And that is a tool of skepticism, or a form of it, I would say. But both still start with what can frequently be, not always, but frequently be with the dishonest assumption that you're being lied to. So you start with the assumption that you're being lied to, or the person you're talking to must not be telling the truth, and then you constantly force them to prove to you that what you're saying is true. So, I mean, if I were to use skepticism coherently, I could certainly, and consistently, I could certainly conclude that you don't exist, Brian. I just have to keep asking you to prove it. And you can go all day, and I can continue coming up with reasons why the reason you gave for you existing are not good enough. Because that's what skepticism does. In fact, I'm of the opinion that skepticism, while it's useful, if it's not tempered with what I would call inclusive or inductive reasoning, all you do is eliminate things. You eliminate, you eliminate, you eliminate. And I even see this happening in a lot of our political process now, broadly culturally. You look around for what's wrong, and you're going to get rid of what's wrong under the assumption that the world will be good again. But all you've been doing is looking at the bad. And so you got rid of one bad thing. Guess what? The world's still shit. From a Catholic perspective, I'd say it's because we're in a fallen world. But in any case, no matter what wrong you fix, there will be more ugly in the world. It's just a given. If we fixed all the men's issues that we're talking about, which are huge, there'd still be shitty things in the world. And what I find that sort of skepticism, that's just all we're going to do is get rid of the bad. We're not going to build on. We're not going to bring in new ideas. We're not going to bring in make new syntheses. We're not going to or even go back to the wisdom of the past, because there's a lot of wisdom in the past. Fucking read Plato, read Aristotle. It's useful stuff. Until we do that, all we're going to basically, I was talking to Paulo Munoz about this. I hope I just said his right. God bless you, Paulo. The game diviner.
Yeah,
and,
Paulo Munoz or Munoz, I think.
And he's like, this kind of reductionist thinking leads ultimately to despair, because all you could do is say all the bad things you want to get rid of that you can't, and that's all you can see, and that's all you can focus on. And that even starts to tend to lead to a sort of nihilism. And a complete despair. How the fuck can I do anything? And it winds up, in my view, a view of my fellow, organized Catholic thinkers, like, look how cramped your minds look. We see it all the time. It's funny. You get this, what we call a materialist view, which is another view that ought to be coming back, by the way. A term, materialism. Because you hear me say materialism, and you probably think I mean money and pursuing consumer wealth. That's kind of from the Marxist and the neo-Hayek, those guys that are into Murray Rothbard and all that. Yeah, that's economic materialism, where good is measured by how much money you make, right? And anything else is just personal opinion. But classically, materialism went back to the God question itself. I'm going back to Plato here, right? I'm not talking to you about Jesus. I'm not talking about the Bible. You can just say Bible's a bunch of bullshit. Go ahead. I don't blink. You don't have to throw it in my face, but if you think it's bullshit, you can think it's bullshit. I'm talking about Plato, 300 years before Christ, okay? It's a really simple question. You look at the universe around you. How is it here? And when you sit there and say, well, the Big Bang and biology and evolution, like, you just skipped the question. Why does existence exist? Why something rather than nothing? Why are we here? Why is any of it here? Where did the electrons come from, and what makes them go that way? Why are there photons, and why do they go that way? What's holding the laws of physics up and making them continue to work? Science can describe the laws of physics. It can't tell you why they're there and why they're consistent. In fact, they can't even tell you if they're consistent. I mean, even the ultimate question of why does logic work at all? Classically, all of those things were understood to be questions that people like Aristotle and Plato and Socrates would measure against the concept they called God. The actual word was theos, but the word theos, until the last few decades, was consistently always translated as God. And in the classical Western civilization understanding, even people who were not religious, they all understood when you said God that what you meant was, what makes existence exist? Why is any of it here? Why don't the laws of physics collapse? Why does logic work at all? That's God.
Yeah.
That is what the word means. And if you were a theist, you thought there was God, then the question become, what properties does it have? Was it intelligent or not? Was it a big thing like a lever? We don't know. But it's something that's holding up existence itself. The Christian understanding adds to that and says, yes, it's intelligence. He's talked to us. We call him our Father. Now, that's a more strenuous claim, and we don't have to go there. But to sit there and look at somebody who wants to talk about God and just call him a retard, you look like the retard. Because if you take a universe and you posit a universe with no first cause, no ultimate unmoved mover, nothing that makes reality be, you have to assume, you have no other choice, you have to assume it's all random and causeless. Yeah. That would make you an atheist. There is no ultimate cause. And if you can't decide, classically, that made you an agnostic. So all those people out there saying, oh, you're trying to talk about God. No, I'm not proselytizing. In fact, just as a point of reference, Catholics are not allowed to proselytize. We're only allowed to talk to you if you ask us. Didn't know that, did you? The fact of the matter is, you had this group called the Four Horsemen, which the mainstream media made a big deal out of, and made it out like they were brilliant thinkers and brilliant scholars. None of them are. As if nobody had any answers to these horrible things they say about how religion makes people kill, religion makes people laugh, or rape, that religion makes people torture others to death. No, I'm here to tell you, certainly the Catholic faith doesn't. And I'll be happy to talk to anybody about the history of any of those allegations. But I really think that these organized atheists were part of the proto-social justice set. Sorry, I really believe that. They wanted to drive rational discussion of God out. So they played up the Christian fundamentalists, who were always a tiny minority and still are, and they played up these atheists who were fighting them. Whereas those of us who are educated in our faith always thought that stupid creationist versus, I mean, seriously, St. Thomas Aquinas dealt with the creationists 1,600 years ago. Why are you bringing that to me now? This whole dialectic of religious people as zombies, who just auto-believe what they read in the Bible. And by the way, you can read the Bible to me and tell me what it says, and I have to do it. When I see these attitudes coming out, I think, what are you guys, 12? And 13 maybe? This is not what real religious people are like. And don't make assumptions about us. Mm-hmm. And that's part of my message. You can stop making assumptions about us right now. One of the reasons Richard Dawkins is not able to speak is because he was no longer useful to the social justice set. He helped drive out traditional, scholarly, philosophical, theological discussion and spiritual discussions from the universities. Helped us come to this batshit lunatic idea that science is and religion are enemies. By the way, Neil deGrasse Tyson, another one. Neil, good Lord, what a bit of hate propaganda Cosmos was. It was propaganda. And I'll show that to anybody who wants to, too. It's ridiculous. You've lost out on the rationalist community. Which so many of the MRM are enamored of. Well, you should stop being enamored of them, because seriously, they're not being helpful.
Well, let me ask you a question. You mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I've been critical of him too, but maybe not exactly for the same reasons. And you mentioned Cosmos, and I did watch it, and I noticed that there was a lot more talk about anti-theism and than there was. I mean, there was a lot of science, but it wasn't like Carl Sagan's Cosmos that he did in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Carl Sagan version of that?
I'm so old. I watched it.
Okay.
When it ran on PBS.
Well, yes. No, because Carl Sagan's, I thought, was actually I liked it more because I felt like I was being preached to less, and it was more like I was being invited to join the discussion. And I mean, I'm using the word preach for lack of a better term, but that is essentially what how I often feel whenever I read an article in the news about anything, really. I mean, it's there's a lot less invitation to think freely, and a lot more people telling you what you should be thinking. And as even though deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos was definitely higher budget and had really nice effects, I felt like I was being preached to from for a lot of it about what I'm supposed to think. Yeah. And I've been critical of what's his name, the Thomas Sowell, the economist, has called intellectuals, and how intellectuals are they're just blowhards that don't really know what they're talking about. They're operating, well, essentially he was saying that we think that just because someone is intellectual and really smart and may have a PhD in a given discipline, then that makes them experts in every discipline. So, for example, people like Noam Chomsky, he's got, he's a smart guy, and he knows about the areas that he's smart in, but for whatever reason, he's often the guy that everyone wants to hear from when it comes to discussions about politics and philosophy, even though that's not really his wheelhouse. And they do the same thing with DeGrasse Tyson, and they do it with Bill Nye, who doesn't. I don't even think Bill Nye has a PhD. The guy wears a bow tie. He used to run a children's show, but he's like the guy whenever, and it's always because they want to push some kind of.
Well, I'll tell you. Let me just tell you exactly what my issue with Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos was. And by the way, I'll give a shout out to Bishop Robert Barron, a Catholic bishop, who did a great answer. If you go on YouTube and look for Robert Barron, 2 R's, he's a Catholic bishop, used to be a priest. Robert Barron on Neil deGrasse Tyson. He just devastates him. The undercurrent of the entire Cosmos thing that you felt you were being preached to, the consistent message was they were trying to tell you that primitive, stupid, religious people were telling you what you had to believe, but now we're smart and we have science and we don't need all that. Which, by the way, is part of the what I call the New Age creed. And historically, it's nonsense. It is especially the worst kind of anti-Catholic bashing. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you, but the Big Bang theory was formulated by a Catholic priest in the 20th century, not Mr. Hawking. Mr. Hawking just said it was okay for us to think it, because before Mr. Hawking made everybody accept it, one of the objections to the Big Bang Theory was that it might be a papist plot to get us to believe the theory of Genesis. I'm not kidding you. If you read about it in Stephen Hawking's own biography or his own background, he was consistently confronted with people who said that's a Pope plot. Who's
the priest that talked about the Big Bang Theory? Who made the theory that you were?
Oh God, what is his name now? I think it was a French name.
Okay. Well, if you find it, let me know. I'll let, because look.
Georges Lemaitre.
Georges Lemaitre. Okay.
Yep, Georges Lemaitre. And so that was one of the undercurrents, and it's a standing assumption I see from people I know every day that faith and science are in conflict, and this is the worst sort of pernicious anti-religious nonsense. As I just said, okay, again, it's cool. I'm Catholic. I can actually mention my own Saint Thomas Aquinas, 1600 years ago, said it. If science and what we think we know from theology appears to be in conflict, there may be an error in the science, but we just may have something wrong in our theology and may need to adjust. That's not some slippery new idea Dean Esmay came across. That's Thomas Aquinas. You'll find it echoed in St. Thomas. Actually, it wasn't a Thomas Aquinas. I meant Augustine of Hippo, 1600 years ago. Thomas Aquinas said the same sorts of things many times about 800 years ago. So I'll even hear that. I'll say, well, as Christians, we don't believe it. They'll say, well, you're wiggling out of the theory of Genesis. No, St. Augustine did 1600 years ago. Stop telling me what I'm supposed to believe. Christians aren't that stupid and aren't that primitive, at least not the educated ones.
Now, okay, no, that's interesting. Okay, so what I'm getting from this seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I know that this was like where, this just, we didn't know where this conversation was going to go. So here we are, and that's fine. What it sounds like could be, I was just, okay, let me set this up a little bit. Yeah. Before the show, I was talking to somebody else about theism and atheism in so far as how it relates to things like social justice and men's rights and so on. And it is my opinion that I don't care what you believe in, as long as you're going to help us dig, right? And that's what
I said.
Okay, so that's just my personal way of thinking. Like I don't really care what your faith is or isn't, what the lack of thereof, because we got men have problems. We need to like roll up our sleeves and fix those problems, and that's kind of like how Honey Badger Radio is. Like not every some people in HBR have are spiritual in some way. Some are atheists. Nobody cares. We don't let that get in the way. We just get it done. But when I was talking to my friend about this before the show, one of the things I was talking about was, well, what's the thing that went wrong within the atheist community? And it's not necessarily the belief in atheism itself as a principle, but rather the way the people within it have behaved. And because social justice and has grown out in many ways, it's come out of that space. And I think that there's a couple reasons for it. But when we look at people like Steve Shives and like Kevin Logan and like Lacey Green, these people are atheists that become social justice warriors, and they, for whatever reason, they compartmentalize facts or things that they may be exposed to that suit their worldview and the things that go against it, and they kind of like separate them out. And they use tactics like demonizing their enemy or dehumanizing them. And in part, or as a consequence of that, they dehumanize their opponents. So that it becomes easier for them to disagree with them because they're actually trying to fill a void. So, you know, like, I don't know the history of all these people I'm talking about, but we'll use Lacey Green as an example. Lacey Green used to be a Mormon, from what I understand. And she discovered atheism, I guess, after having been raised as a Mormon in what is likely a very sex-negative and conservative household. So my guess is that Lacey Green found that to be very upsetting because she felt lied to, she felt manipulated or controlled, and she wanted to rebel against this lifestyle that she had growing up. So she was like, I'm going to go completely in the opposite direction. I'm going to make sex positive videos. I'm going to become a feminist. I'm going to rebel against all of the stuff that I was raised with. And as she does so, she actually forms, and I think a lot of people in Atheism Plus probably have come to the conclusion under the same circumstances, and it actually makes them really angry that they had to live with religion. And maybe, you know, they may have been like some example where they experienced abuse of some kind, or the fact that they felt lied to is part of what fuels them. But they still have this mentality that morality has to come from somewhere. So since religion is gone and they don't want it in their life, they have to fill it with something else. So they insert social justice. It's basically replacing one ideology with another ideology.
That's right. Although,
and that's what I honestly think, because there are some people who maybe they just logically come to the conclusion that they want to be atheist, and they're generally silent about it. Like they don't go online and, you know, go after religious people or whatever, or maybe they just stick to criticizing the ideas of people who just have bad ideas, whether they're religious or not. And they realize that you know, you can be a religious person with good ideas, and you can be a religious person with bad ideas, and you can be an atheist with good ideas and an atheist with bad ideas, and that's all it really comes down to, is who's hurting who. So I think that from what I'm seeing, like when it comes to the people like Rebecca Watson and Steve Shives and Lacey Green, these are those kinds of atheists. They're basically they're social justice warriors because they need to fill the holes in their logic and their morality with something greater than themselves. They still need to feel like they're a part of something. That's why when and they get really angry when you point it out. That's why if you say, well, feminism is a cult, or feminism is religion, which we did a show about a few weeks ago, it really pisses these atheists off, because the last thing they want to be affiliated with is organized religion. But what they don't realize is it is the same thing.
well, yeah, can I make a point to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I really do agree with pretty much everything you just said. It's spot on. I cringe a little at people calling, like, let's say if you're Catholic, just reducing that to ideology, or any other. It depends on the religion, right? I reject completely the dodgy, oh, they're all stupid, so I can ignore them all. No, some have more heft and substance than others. I have Thomas Aquinas, bitch. So if you think you got a pagan who can match that, bring it. Well, but that said, you know, all good ideas. Atheism itself is not new. You go all the way back again. I don't know, you talk about any big idea, probably some Greek said it first, right? You go back to Epicurus, you go back to the Stoics, they were all atheists. They were aware they had made that distinction. And they didn't sit there and say silly things like, I just dismissed a dumb idea with, I just dismissed the sky fairy. No, they knew what they were talking about. They were saying, the universe was caused by nothing, the universe caused itself, or the question is irrelevant and moot, we can't know it, therefore we have to go from there. So, I mean, if you want a really smart atheist philosopher,
Yeah.
maybe. But the bottom line is they were people who recognized that this was an important question because, yeah, if you don't have something objective to put your morality against, which, by the way, science has yet to produce and isn't going to anytime soon, then what happens is you've decided that you are the ultimate moral authority and your conscience will drive you. And you will meet other people who are just like you. Maybe you're really compassionate. There is evidence that atheists can be more compassionate than religious people, although I think that's, you got to look at that carefully. But what you do is you meet people who think just like you, and you're all intelligent, and you all have the same basic ethical and moral compass, and you all agree, and then when you go look at another atheist who's not acting like that, you wonder what's wrong with him. And the answer is there are feminist atheists, there are white nationalist atheists, there are racist atheists, there are Republican atheists, there are Democrat atheists, there are socialist atheists, there are Hayek, Ayn Rand worshipping objectivist atheists. Atheism doesn't cohere to a specific ideology. Atheism is an ideological position around which you can build things. Theism is an ideological position around which you can build things. Atheism ultimately does push everything to your individual conscience and what your buddies can talk you into. It doesn't challenge you like the study of ethics would, or a deep understanding of Orthodox Christian theology can get you. I mean, Christians can disagree all the time. What you'll find is that the non-fundamentalist Christians, which is most of us, don't just whip open a Bible and say, here, there will be my answer. You have to be coming out of an interpretative tradition that's strong and vibrant and, by the way, authoritative, so that you have people who can say, this is what we stand for and this is what we do not stand for. You know, that's what the word heresy actually means. It just means you're wrong. Get out. That's not persecution. If you're establishing an organization, you have to establish an orthodoxy and defend it, or the organization will collapse. Atheism cannot cohere around anything. I'm telling you right now, I've seen them encore hardcore white nationalist and Arab nationalist atheists running around in some of the places, in the men's rights places I see. Arab nationalists, hardcore atheists, racists who want a race war, and they're atheists. There's nothing in atheism to make you an inherently better person. And I've actually long thought that if you don't come to some kind of idea like God, some kind of respect for organized religion, which is the people who keep the wheels from falling off, you will devolve into this kind of coherence, because there's nothing scientific about atheism. There's nothing particularly more logical about theism than theism. There is no greater logic. If you can't decide on the theist question, you're an agnostic, and those social justice types and the ones who came before you played a trick on you and told you that somehow science and atheism go together. No, they didn't. Demand they prove that scientifically, and they can't. Atheism is not a coherent position. It doesn't make you a bad person, but it fucking well doesn't make you a superior or smarter person. That's Richard Dawkins' hubris, and he's being proven wrong all the time. And so one of the reasons I got on this is when I started in the movement, I met a lot of people who thought they were atheists. And I thought, huh, that's interesting. And I just would ask any of them, ask Karen, ask Allison. We go way back, 5-6 years, right? They said, I'm an atheist. I was like, oh, I'm not, I'm Catholic. And we moved on, and it was never an issue. But then recently I have found myself surrounded by people who will sling shit at theists, sling shit at the religious, sling shit at Jews. I won't even mention the other Abrahamic faith everybody's mad about right now, that I also think they frequently distort, even though I don't believe that religion. And they love nothing more than to smear Catholics and say things about Catholics that aren't true. And I really finally decided, look, I'm drawing a line in the sand. I'm in the part where we're good to religious people, and people of God are welcome. Even pagans and Wiccans, come. We can argue like friends about that or not talk about it. But there's a lot of people. I had good friends I considered MRAs sitting there telling me that the Catholic Church used to torture people to death to get them to accept Christ. That's a gross misrepresentation of history. Christianity always spread peacefully. The few things you ever read about horrible injustices committed by Christians in the name of the faith that do happen are in fact unusual and memorable because of it. And it's why they always refer to the same ones. Christians get to own it. We own it. We talk about it. What I find the non-religious people don't seem to appreciate about that is we keep an institutional body going. We take the blows, and we remember our own history, and we can answer for it, and we can answer for how we've learned from it. People who are non-religious get to just kind of pop into the 21st century and say, well, I never was involved in the Spanish Inquisition. I must be better. Hey, Catholics know the Spanish Inquisition was a problem. We keep our history. We don't throw out the church. Maybe some respect for that and the fact that we actually sponsored so much of the arts and sciences from the fall of the Roman Empire till at least the 19th century. You can have a little respect for it. And you could not pat the Catholic on the head when he tries to correct you and tell you that something that you thought you knew was wrong. Because what you think you know about the Catholic Church most of the time will not be true. So there you go.
I think that what I've noticed it was the point I was trying to get at before. Often when atheists are criticizing religion, they're usually the ones that are dishonest about it, the ones that are angry, like the people I was talking about, like the Lacey Greens and the Steve Shives and the Atheism Plus people of the world, they will often conflate, and I will say that I think this is true. They will conflate what the three things. Okay, one, the text as it is written in the books, and I run into this a lot. So they'll basically cite whatever they need to from the holy text that people, to make people that believe in that look as bad as possible, which I don't think is necessary. It's sort of like how the media goes after Donald Trump and they try to twist and warp the things that he says, or they outright lie about him, or the way that they treated Gamergate too. And it's almost like, well, if they're so bad, then why do you need to misrepresent them by quoting the text from the book as it is written, which nobody really follows to the letter, or they go after they conflate the practice with the individual people, and when they lump that together. So that's why you always get for example, if someone people who are talking about Islam, if you get someone to talk about Islam honestly about what's happening, then someone inevitably comes in because they want to attack Christians instead. They'll bring up the Crusades or the Inquisition. It's stuff from a long time ago. And I think it's because they have again, they have it out for the people, and I think it comes from those angrier parts. And I want to relate this to Gamergate because I think there is some overlap in how the media misrepresents or tries to attack people because they want to they want to drive some kind of a narrative, right? So considering all that's going on with Gamergate, the rise of cultural libertarianism and what people like Milo are calling cultural libertarianism, or what Sargon calls classical liberalism, Dave Rubin leaving the Young Turks, the Dangerous Faggot Tour. Milo was recently talking to
my fellow Catholic. Thank you.
Yeah, Milo.
And by the way, I've talked to Milo. No, guys, you atheists who are hoping he's not really a believer in God. No, he's really a believer in God. Sorry.
Well, no, it's fine. Actually, real quick before I finish my question, if you've spoken to Milo, I'd love it if you could reach out to him and ask him if he'd love to come on or if he'd like to come on for a fireside chat, because I've been having people asking me to get Milo on for a long time. and I don't know that he even knows that we exist. But anyway, Milo was recently on Adam Carolla's podcast, which I think is huge, and they talked about Gamergate and cultural libertarianism and this social justice shit getting out of hand. James Woods, the actor, he quoted a tweet that Ash Scow, who we had on a Fireside Chat a few weeks ago. She's an adorable brunette that writes for the Washington Examiner, in case you guys don't know.
right-wing hottie-ass show, yeah.
And she wrote an article on that James Woods retweeted, and he also mentioned the phrase special snowflakes in his tweet. I heart James Woods. And Gregory Allen Elliott was found innocent of Twitter harassment and so on. So there's all this stuff that's going on. And it's like just all over the place, especially on social media. Do you think, or do you see that there is a change in the tides with regards to what we're calling the culture wars with all of this? Like, do you think that people are starting to sort of wake up en masse, or at least see that, what has been going on, how corrupt our media is, and so on? Do you see that, or am I being a little bit too optimistic?
Yes, to all that.
So I'm being too optimistic. And
No, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Here's what I think is happening. You're absolutely right. We are definitely eroding into the culture. There's no question. I've been at it longer than you. Not pulling rank, I just have. Dude, you think it's bad now? Oh, my God. Task Allison to tell you what it was like in 2010. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. So, yes, it's so much better in a lot of ways, and especially the last year. Actually, I'll take credit for it. We had this thing called the International Conference on Men's Issues in 2014, late 2014, so about a year and a half ago. We fucked up a lot of things in that conference, including some really fucked up bad communications and things. But in the final analysis, that got so much press. The press hasn't stopped writing about MRA since then. And even though it's all negative, 98% negative, they're having to talk about us. And guess what? I see this on Twitter especially. I went from nobody following me who would use their real name and picture to respectable mainstream political correspondents reading me, and others that I can't tell you about using screen names and anime avatars, letting me know in DM that they work at newspapers or universities and have to stealth read me. So there's no question that it's getting better. At least the criticism of the feminist narrative is getting there. Mm-hmm. What's happening also, though, and again, I'll call out, I know Allison and I have had conversations like this. Karen and I have had conversations with this. Paul and Elam and I have had conversations about this. The next hurdle, and oh man, I'm just going to cause an explosion now. The next hurdle after the feminists is the right-wingers. And
I think that there's some truth to that for sure. We certainly can't ignore the right-wingers. We were just talking about the kind of people on the right that are like, man up, put on your big boy pants types. That really is that what you mean?
Good,
when you say that?
Yeah. A good clue is they love the word cuck. I mean, is automatically, probably a right-wing nut job, not much better than a social justice warrior. That is what I think every time I hear cuck, because it came up out of the white and Arab nationalist forces from the Middle East. And it was actually invented to describe conservative supporters of Israel. Now, don't get me wrong. I actually get in trouble with people because I'm pro-Israel. I think Israel has a right to exist and has a right to exist in peace. That doesn't mean I endorse everything they do. It also doesn't mean I believe there's a Muslim holy war going on with them, because there isn't. What's happening in the Middle East that we don't hear about, but which you can confirm, is that on the other side of the fundamentalist Muslim radicals, and I will call them radicals, not real Muslims, Muslim radicals, on the other side are fascists, real fascists, out of the Hitler-Mussolini tradition. They never gave up power after World War II, so Hitler's buddies are still active in the Arab nationalist cause. Bashar Assad is a racist Arab nationalist and a fascist in the Hitler tradition, literally, not metaphorically. Go look up the history of his political party. For some reason here in the West, we don't talk about secular, non-religious fascists who are equally vulnerable and killing people in the Middle East. In fact, it's the fight between the religious nut jobs and the secular nut jobs that's driving people to want to run the fuck out of there. And that's been going on for a while now. And yet somebody wants us to focus on religion. Meanwhile, my Christian brothers, my Orthodox Christian brothers, and again, Orthodox Christians are more like Catholics than they are evangelicals, a lot more. They are, in fact, we tend to view them as a sister church, part of the sadly sundered body of Christ, but they're as Christian as we are in every way. And like Catholics did throughout the 20th century, millions of us were killed for being Catholic in the 20th century. We haven't forgotten that. And we're watching our brothers go now. And you want to make this a religious fight over Europe? What are you doing to help those Christians over there? Mostly Christian men, by the way. Mm-hmm. And you want to argue, you want to have a philosophical argument about religion? This is preposterous. Religion isn't the driving force. If you look at history, Vox Day, he and I disagree on some things, and but you've probably heard of him, the Sad Puppies guy, pretty hard right wing.
We had him on the show, I believe.
Fascinating man, very much a Christian, an evangelical Christian from what I can tell. I don't think he likes Catholics much, but that's okay. He wrote a great book called The Irrational Atheists, which I strongly recommend, even though he and I disagree on some things. It's a great book, The Irrational Atheists. And in there, he has a pretty good look at history and how often religion has been used to create war. And his conclusion to be this was the same as mine. Almost never. Almost in all of the recorded history, almost never was religion the motivating factor in the war. In the few cases that it did happen, they're pretty easy to document. And yeah, as it happens, the Muslims are a little more likely than Christians or anybody else to do it, but only a little. Most wars are not related to religion at all, or religion is just sort of pasted over it, but the motivation is clearly not religious. However, religious persecution and killing people for their religion, that's never stopped, and it's going on now. And yes, I'm going to keep picking on the organized atheists, the organized ones who are big fans of people like Dan Dennett and Sam Harris. Dude, you look at history, people who think like you, atheists, are way more likely to murder Christians like me than Christians like me are ever to hurt you. And that's just a historical fact. I assert it, in fact, as an empirical fact he cannot refute. Mm-hmm. And so this too is why the scathing contempt towards spiritual people, this referring to it as a sky fairy and your invisible friend, is part of, to me, that same narrative that drives out ideas that were normative in Western culture up until the late 20th century. I mean, people think atheism is new and brave. I was just talking to you about atheist philosophers from 2,300 years ago. And by the way, Richard Dawkins doesn't say anything those atheists didn't used to say. Nothing new there. None of the arguments have changed. He's just kind of going with the jump of, but I'm correct. And I'm a scientist, so you must listen to me. Religious intolerance is the problem. Religious hate is the problem. That actually kills people more than racism does. Bakhteh has that in his book too. He was dead on right about all that. So I don't care if you're an atheist. I really don't. Atheism is nothing new at all. And no, despite what you've heard, you were not by law forbidden. It was always very rare in history for people to not be able to be atheists. Usually you found that in some fundamentalist community. Even the myth of like the Spanish Inquisitions and all that, that was mostly to go after clerics and people within church office. If you were just an everyday non-religious person, they didn't care what you did. That's more history for you. The idea that atheists are oppressed and unable to think because some religious person is going to come in and hit them with a Bible. Look, man, I'm sorry if your uncle or your dad did that to you, but stop putting that shit on me, and then I won't put Joseph Stalin on you, right? That's kind of how I feel. And I will say I've been mean to atheists, but maybe it's just because I've been surrounded by so many smug ones lately within the movement. Is listen, there's some fantastic people who are atheists. I've met some. Karen herself, I love her to death. She's a good, awesome person. But when I
Yeah.
look at it, I say, you're looking for when you want to activate people to do something. I would hope by now we would notice that logical argument gets you so far. And then beyond that, you've got to look at the deeper things that actually motivate them. And I'm sorry to tell you, but God is one of the things that's motivated human beings for 2,000 years, whatever your religion is. So you can stop pretending we're stupid, and you might actually want to start talking to some of us. Like I was amazed. I guess I keep calling out Sargon, but
No.
Sargon.
Let me also throw something in there, because you bring up something that I do agree with this. One of the things that I think that's really missing from all of the discourse that goes on regarding anything that is like politically charged or emotionally charged or whatever it is, there seems to be a straight up lack of curiosity.
Yeah.
And like the question why, it's fallen by the wayside. And I mean, like in whatever discussion, like that desire to invite people in, when regardless or despite the fact that you may not agree with them, it's gone. It's like a lost art. And I see this because for many people, it's just easier for them to dismiss you or not want to hear what you have to say because they've decided what kind of person you are based on a few, beliefs you may have, or what you look like, or what your race is, or whether you're male or female. These things are they are anti-intellectual. They're just
Yeah.
that is the reason why we try to do what we do. We bring people on that we may not agree with, and onto our shows. We've had Vox Day on. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I know we had a guy on from this Sad Puppies. I'm pretty sure it's that guy. And we didn't agree with that guy on his, on some of his beliefs, but we tried to respect him. We wanted to talk to him. We wanted to understand what he was coming from. And, I think that we're still richer for it, for having had the discussion. I'm all for that. Like and this happens, like this is going back to, the problems within these more like these social justice warriors. They are just not curious people. And this is why they don't expand. This is why they don't learn. Like I didn't know about like a lot of the things that you're saying here. And, I think that it's actually increased my curiosity to like investigate it. Maybe, I'll look into it and see where it leads. I don't see the harm in that. And I think that that's actually a really good, I think that that's actually ultimately one of the most important things that I'm seeing from all of this, the internet debates, internet discussions around, around atheism, around feminism, around ideologies, around politics, that there is a lack of curiosity. There's a lack of wondering why, of a desire to understand the other person's, not just their positions, but their arguments, and maybe even like a little bit about their history, about their experiences. And we just don't do that anymore.
Here's what I was yes, you need to bring all voices. And I wasn't trying to pick on Sargon, but I'm going to mention one thing. He has on some other, somebody from the secular society says, what are we going to do about all these irrational things? And he has a discussion about it. He's brought on several of his other scientific rationalist friends. And they all just kind of sit agog and say, well, what we say makes perfect sense. Why aren't people listening? And that's what I would call even the poor idealist atheist who thinks that because something sounds reasonable to him, other people will respond. And humans don't work that way. And until the atheist, secularist, skeptic, rationalist, whatever goal community pulls its head out of its ass and says, why don't I talk to some smart theists, not your buddy who's a fundamentalist Christian who doesn't really study things, but I mean someone who's really a believer, in to talk about these things. Because guess what? Really smart people believe in God. I'm sorry, they do. And you may want to believe that that's going to go away. It's not. In fact, what I would predict for you is that atheism, ideological atheism especially, If you look at the numbers, atheists are breeding themselves out. The religious people are going to win by birth, if nothing else. And you're not going to convert us. I'll tell you right now, you're never converting me. I abandoned atheism. I joined the Catholic Church 8 years ago. I was welcomed at Easter Mass 2008. I'm not a cradle Catholic. I chose it because I found atheism incoherent, because it is. And when you talk about that lack of curiosity and that lack of a willingness to talk to people with other views, my God, why wouldn't you talk to a smart, educated, thoughtful pagan? Why wouldn't you? That must be interesting. You know, or whatever it is, not necessarily about what their religion is, whether you can understand it or not, but what's their perspective? And it may be identical to yours, but they may also bring wisdom. One of the things, I didn't get to this, but I talked about what I call materialism.
Oh, yeah.
And I was talking about how there's economic materialism, but there's the other kind. I've written something, and these are what I think are true dogmatic beliefs that people used to be willing to question that don't anymore. And in fact, Fox Day, I modified this over something Fox Day wrote. Okay, but I'm just going to read you from this. Here's some things that I find are not stated as dogma, but that a lot of people nowadays will just accept. Okay, here's one. Nothing exists but natural phenomena. There must be an explanation in physics for it. Thought is a property or function of matter or chemistry. There's another one. Another one. There are no forces, phenomena, or entities which exist apart from or outside of physical nature. Those are all dogmatic assertions you cannot prove. And that's not a mind trick. People will accept that those things are true, but they're not. They're not things you can assert scientifically are true. You know, for thousands of years, philosophers and theologians have had a concept called eternity. Do you know what eternity is? It's outside time and space. That's not something you heard in. That's not something you heard in Doctor Who. That's something you heard out of Aristotle. Outside time and space. Well, what would the properties of things outside time and space look like? Well, I can tell you what, you're not going to bounce an electron or an atom off of it, or a photon. You're not going to be able to use science. If you take the dogmatic scientist, you know, what I would call the materialist perspective, you say, well, then we can't know and we can't think about it. Like, what? That's the reductionism that I was talking about. You've decided because you can't test it with science, it doesn't exist? Really? Back that up. You can't. Science is the way we know things. Back that up scientifically. You can't.
Yeah.
But we accept these assertions and they say them and it's like, okay, that's the reductionism I'm talking about. And the classical philosophers would have called that materialism, which means you believe, you accept as axiomatic, you accept as dogmatic that nothing exists outside of time and space and the laws of physics as we know them. That's materialism. And you've accepted that you must have a materialist explanation for anything. When you open your brain up and say, wow, no, oh, something that is beyond our ability to comprehend, even though we have iPhones and iPads, it opens you up to exploring more. I actually think this ideological, well, you know, if you can't test it scientifically, it's not true, or it's, you know, they'll say, well, I never said that, but it's how their reasoning always goes. Let's use skepticism and reduction to find the truth. And then when they find nothing there, they look confused. It's really quite hilarious. I have to tell you honestly, a few times I've chuckled not at Thunderfoot's jokes, but at his just goony, like, I'm so confused people could think this way. Well, guess what? They do sometimes, because even if they're atheists, even if they're not religious, they can get into some goofy cults like Marxism, objectivism, feminism, the social justice thing.
Don't forget postmodernism.
Postmodernism, yes.
Yeah. But and speaking of Thunderfoot, he hasn't made a lot of anti-theist videos lately. He's been focused a lot on feminism, and in an interview, he actually said that in his mind, feminism is far more dangerous. I think that he said that. He said, you know, I think feminism is actually a more serious problem than theism at this point.
Well, what's an idiot creationist gonna do? Make your kid think something dumb? Well, your kid could grow up thinking about astrology is real too. So fucking what? These feminists are trying to destroy corporate America. They're trying to take over the government. Yeah, I'd have to agree with them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, the main problem is that we, at least right now, unless like, we, like, I don't know, unless that changes, we have a thing in the government called separation of church and state, but that doesn't apply to feminism because technically it's not a religion.
And in fact, I think that's going to be one of the growing things. I heard about some men's rights activists in Canada who were going to try this. They were going to try the argument that feminism was a religion. The problem there is going to be, yeah, you're going to have to think about what our other non-theist religions look like. I'll tell you, one of them is Ayn Rand's objectivism, and I'm sorry, I have some objectivist friends. Guys, you're in a kooky atheist religion. Get out. And Marxism, same deal, by the way. It's a cult. And cult thinking doesn't come from believing in God. Cult thinking doesn't even come from believing in a specific God. Cult thinking is cult thinking, and it's scary to watch. And it's as scary to me as it's scary to you. And it's not because, oh, they're going to... I mean, it's not because they go against my religion. They go against my ethics. I mean, they go together. But the point is, yeah, no, these people are totalitarians. They're real, and they won't stop. All the stuff Karen and them has said is right. It's like this gaping maw of there's nothing they won't stop asking. There's no place they won't stop. You know.
No, it's fine. We were talking about the culture war, and it's 2016, and I'm not saying that to make a Justin Trudeau joke, but being that it is 2016, later this year we're going to have a presidential election, and I've noticed that a lot of the stuff on, especially within the media, has really, really, really been ramping up their feminism, their social justice stuff. MTV, BuzzFeed, HuffPo, they have been straight up putting out racist and sexist shit.
Oh my God, it's horrifying, isn't it?
It's straight up racist and sexist shit on their videos and stuff. And don't forget, like, fuck hate, the people who basically sell T-shirts and claim that it's activism, and they make little kids like cuss their fucking ears out or whatever, their mouth out. But it's all just to make money. And I think that what we're looking at is in the United States especially, is a country that is so incredibly divided along so many lines that it is very likely that the presidential, I mean, we don't know because we can't really call it, but it looks very likely that the presidential campaign is going to come down to the fact that, let's put it this way, without knowing where it's going to go, I have a prediction that it's going to come down to Trump versus Sanders. That's what I think is going to happen. Okay. And the reason why I think it is because they're both considered to be the kinds of people that never would have been candidates for election, let's say 10 or 12 years ago. That would not have happened. But considering where our country is now and how divided it is, it seems, Lou, that this is where we're headed. So my question is, what do you think that is in fact tied to this culture war surrounding with all of this stuff that's going on in the media? And I guess that's basically like, do you think that's all part of the plan? I do. I know that Gawker has even said when they sort of reimagined their media empire, as it were, they're going to drop a bunch of sites and add on a couple of new ones because they wanted to focus on the election. Of course, they have their reasons.
Of course they do. Amongst the reasons, and by the way, one of the things because the mysterious they do a lot, right?
Yeah.
One of the things they do is they imply that you're a conspiracy theorist if you notice the fact that all these big corporations on both sides of the political divide are funding these elections. That ain't a conspiracy. That's the way the system is, and it's horrifying. And they create narratives. They create false narratives. By now, if you're an MRA, by now, if you were in Gamergate, you should have seen clearly that the press will lie to you. And the only big difference I would say to keep in mind, especially some of you who are new to this, you'll find conservatives and right-wingers who are very good at telling you where the media lied. But there are right-wing liars in the press too. And they don't like me saying that, but it's true. And they have political interests they're serving. Michael Crichton had this essay, if I could find it. It was something called the Gell-Mann Effect, GELLES-MANN, and it was so spot on. And it was about a physicist. I think the physicist's name was Gell-Mann. That was his last name. He and Crichton he never practiced as a doctor, but he was a practicing MD. He knew medicine and he did Hollywood stuff. And he was talking to the physicist, and they were both comparing notes about how in their careers, every time they saw something that touched on what they do for a living, in his case, a guy with medical training who also made movies and wrote books. In Gell-Mann's case, in physics, without fail, the newspapers would get wrong. They would just flat out get it wrong. They'd get it backwards. They'd mix cause and effect. He called it the wet streets cause rain fallacy, and said the papers are just fucking full of them. And he says then the Gell-Mann effect is this: it hit on an area you know about, and you could tell that it was bullshit, and oh my God, you can't believe how bad that was. You turn the page and read something about the Middle East, and you assume it must be true.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't trust any of these fuckers in the media, ever. I don't know what to do because it's scary, because then you got to go through the hard, laborious process of finding out what the real truth is. You investigate, and that's more work.
Yeah, and just to real touch on this, I got to drive this home because I agree with the media thing. Like, if the media is like, and there is, there are people who say, and I don't know why they do, that there's no such thing as a liberal media or a liberal media bias. Bullshit. There absolutely
Can they still deny that? Can they still deny that? Really? With a straight face?
Oh, yeah, they totally do. I see it all the time. But, and I'm, again, I'm neither on the left or the right, but, I'm like most people. I have like varying fucking views. That's crazy. But there are people who literally deny that exists, that there is such thing as a liberal media. And the thing is that if you know that they're misrepresenting, sorry about that. They're misrepresenting people on the right. They're misrepresenting MRAs, and they've been like dragging them through the mud for a long, long time. They conflate them with other people. They said, Rush V is an MRA. Look, here he is, in his mom's basement when he was just visiting her. He lives in another country. Here's let's talk about Gamergate. They're all a bunch of neckbeard misogynists, and none of the women in Gamergate are actually women. They're all sock puppets. And they're just a constant liars about, and they get caught in it all the time. And we have people exposing them constantly. Then you have to, if you are going to be distrustful of the media when it suits you, you should also probably practice some of that when it might seem to be more agreeable. I mean, I think that the media in general is so incredibly corrupt, and I will say that the right-wing media can be just as bad. Unfortunately,
I'll go this far: the right-wing media never gets its feet to the fire because there is a liberal media, and it's so easy to see it that the right-wingers can actually get flabby and just say, "Look, they lied again. Look, they lied again," and the implicit is, "Therefore, we're right," and that's.
Yeah, and I'll say, with the right-wing media, I will say that, in general, though, we accept, and I think by and large, most people are okay and really already understand that they have a bias and it comes out. And actually, the funny thing about this is that the liberal media is so ever-present, and there's so much of it that it actually drives people away who are more moderate and sort of like middle of the road, but it won't give them a platform. And so they end up going to right-wing media because they don't have a place else to go. Like Christina Hoff Sommers she's a registered Democrat. She's a feminist, but she's one of these sort of reasonable, even-tempered, like based people. But she's not.
Who also will not stop repeating the lie that second wave feminism was
reasonable.
And by the way, I talked to MRAs in other countries. she's not being honest about what's going on in some of those other countries either. But yeah,
Well,
but she's afraid to shake the boat. She's afraid to rock the boat.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying, that she doesn't have like the whole picture. But that's even more interesting, because she is someone who is, she still has some of those beliefs that the sort of more mainstream feminists would go along with. But unfortunately, she has criticisms of feminism, and she cares about boys.
Have you noticed that it's almost like secular blasphemy to say bad things about the holy name of feminism?
Yeah. And so she can't actually, like, she can't work in many colleges. She can't get a spot on most sort of mainstream media spaces. So she ends up going to like the Enterprise Institute and Prager University, which are, pretty right-wing spaces, or some of them even say that they're like sort of neoconservative or whatever. But the point is that she's not there because she agrees with those people. She's there because she's not getting a platform anywhere else. And that's kind of unfortunate,
No, you know what? You're right. I was being snarky, and it's because I've been a little defensive, because my friend, we don't, have a formal relationship. We're still friends. He made a video critical of Christina. May have been a little harsher than necessary, but people have been going after me for it. But no, I do think there's something to be said for, listen, when you listen to conservatives, they don't want to hear anything about the medical evidence regarding the horrible damage circumcision does. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear about men losing their children. And that's really bothersome to me, because I've had right-wing conservatives call me a whiner. For right-wing conservatives, okay, straight up conservative Republicans call me a whiner talking about fathers' rights issues. These are the same hypocrites who talk about family values. Fuck you. I mean, there is a point where even Christina has to bow to this gynocentric imperative that the conservatives also will not see. But by the way, is not hard at all to see from a Catholic perspective, just in case you were curious.
Yeah.
Because nothing we talk about, I'll tell you this, as a faithful Catholic, with one or two exceptions, not a single thing I've advocated in 5 years comes from anywhere but the Catholic social teaching tradition that goes back to the 19th century and the values we really believe in. Whatever you may have heard, I'm from a faith that has held for 2,000 years that racism is wrong, and that has held for 2,000 years that men and women are of equal value in the eyes of God, although we do believe men and women are different at some level. Those are part of my tradition. This is not some new socialist egalitarian thing. Everything I advocate for comes straight from my Christian faith. Maybe people should talk to us, the reasonable ones, because we do have insights. And just looking for the skeptics, like I said, skepticism is fundamentally flawed because it starts with the presumption that you're being lied to.
Yeah.
And therefore, I can watch me be a skeptic and tell you why it was your fault you got kicked out of Calgary. I can do it real easy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's clearly not the truth. The inductive reasoning that makes you start thinking, well, what actually happened is what it gets you to the truth. And that's not always just assuming the falseness of things. You have to seek the truth. And from my perspective, the seeking of truth and the seeking of beauty are one and the same. That's why I get along well with artists.
So the thing about Christina Hoff Sommers. So I will say this for my part. I don't agree with everything she says, but I like that she's speaking out against against what she considers the excesses of feminism, and yes, she's advocating for boys. And that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think that's, for me, what I think it could be is if she talks to the right people and has enough conversations and remains open-minded, which I think she is, because she says try to stick with the facts and all that. I think that she could easily find herself seeing more of the issues that men have. And I think that by and large, when I notice a lot of anti-feminist types that aren't necessarily MRAs, they often do the whole like second wave feminism was okay and first wave feminism or proto-feminism was okay, without looking at the arguments that like Karen has made that essentially explain how that was probably never necessary, and the people who started it are not role models. But I think that I'll take it, like I'll take it for now, and then we'll see where Christina's journey takes her, because I think that she's still kind of figuring all this stuff out, even at the, I think she's like 67. So even at her young age of 67 years old. So.
What I would say to you there is that she is an employee of the American Enterprise Institute, which is a 100% respectable, legitimate, reasonable, conservative think tank that will have lines it will never cross, no matter what the logic states, because it will be politically untenable for them. I think you will probably find that this is true of some of our other friends in the media. They took a big risk just to acknowledge our existence. Continually pressing them won't work because they're afraid. And what we have to do as men's rights activists is stop looking for people like her for validation. And I don't dislike her. We've exchanged emails. I published one of her pieces once with her permission. She's backed off from us since then. I think it's because both the Republican and Democratic establishments wish we didn't exist. Because you're going to get it if you go out there, you start meeting Republicans and talking to them about this. You're going to get the same kind of neckbeard, whiny, loser, baby, whiner, woman beater, rapist thing from right wingers that you are from feminists, and that's because the conservative establishment doesn't like us either. A few of them have taken a chance and not gotten their heads cut off, but there's only so far they can go. So this to me goes back to, I know what is in the new honey badger thing. Trying to change the political landscape is foolish. It's owned lock, stock, and barrel by corporate America. You can only change the culture. So this is why Honey Badger Brigade, in my view, is vitally needed. Artists are vitally needed. Nerds are vitally needed, because nerds and artists are our great thinkers, poets, and philosophers, and the ones who drive the ideas that change the world. But you're not changing the political culture. Forget it. That's 10, 20 years away. You need to convince everyday people that what we're seeing is the truth.
Yeah.
And that it's reasonable, and that the world will not end if you say something bad about a woman.
Yeah.
You get that into the culture. And make them really look at what's going on with our little boys in the schools, look at what's going on in corporate governance, and the way feminism is taking over HR departments all over corporate America. We need the culture to change.
Right. It's about, it goes back to the thing where I was saying how people, there's like this death of curiosity. There's this death of asking why and trying to understand people's positions, because because when you do that, you stop talking. And I'm also, like, I'm not fond of labels, for example. When people say things like, liberal or conservative, I mean, I use them out of convenience, but I actually really don't like saying it, because a lot of people don't really think of it as an invitation to continue discussion or try to better understand, but rather as a way to close it out. And a lot of, obviously, social justice warriors use it all the time. I mean, Sui Park herself, as an example, she said, as a white man, I don't think that you're, in a position to understand my lived experiences or something like that. And the goal of that was to say, shut up. You don't know. I'm Sui Park. I'm a person of color and a narcissist, and therefore I know what my experiences are and you don't. So, and I'm not going to enact the labor of explaining it to you. And unfortunately, that is a common thing that happens all over the place on all sides, where people don't want to engage in conversation. And I think that what I would say is that, what I like about Honey Badger Radio, but I don't think it's the only place, because I think Sargon is doing this too, and I think other people are doing it too, is that there is a desire to engage in conversation, even with people you don't agree with 100% or even partly, if they'll have it. And it talks about how we would like to talk about how to think or how to engage in these things, and use media to hopefully impact the culture. And I think that those things are really important, because trying to change, as you said, trying to change the political landscape now is essentially like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Without
their advertisers want won't be compatible. I hate to be that rude, but that's what's going on. Although I will say of hope for our system that we do have self-funded candidates now. I don't know if that's better, but I think Hillary's going to win the nomination. I think you're wrong about that. I think Trump is probably our next president. I'm not
Well, if
saying good or
Hillary
bad.
wins, if Hillary wins and it's not like Trump versus Bernie, but Trump versus Hillary, Trump is going to be our next president. Because I know plenty of Democrats that are like anybody but Hillary, you know.
I know she's the most horrible candidate who's ever existed. I'm sorry, somebody's going to say it's because he's a feminist. I'm saying that. No, she's awful. I mean, she's just, I am having fun like a normal human. Vote for me or go to hell. I mean, what the fuck is that up there? She's horrible, right? But Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, who's also a multi-billionaire, may be getting in, and that could completely change the thing. But to get back to what I think,
yeah, go ahead.
The culture is what we have. It's not going to matter who wins that much. I mean, hell, it might help the men's rights movement if Hillary wins. Just because, well, that's the loyal, you know, we Lance the Boyle. Let's just have it on full-on feminism. Let's do this thing. You know, now at least the lines are clear. But
if we survive 4 years after that,
but otherwise, I just, you know, it doesn't matter. There's this thing in political science. I've mentioned it so many times. I can't mention it enough. It's called the falsification preference. Google falsification preference. It's so important. And that is when people lie about what they think. And by the way, I know I keep talking about this, but because it's true, I got a lot of theist friends. I've got fans who stopped reading me because I started talking smack about atheist assholes. I picked up a lot of new fans, not just other Catholics either, Christians, Baptists, pagans, philosophers, and others who all tell me the same thing. Really sick of ideological atheist bullying and privileging the materialist point of view in all discussions as the rational one. That's what Letter to the Heathen Nation is going to be about, because it's not a defensible standpoint ethically, let alone scientifically or logically. What happens in preference falsification is most people will lie about what they believe on certain topics, including, for example, believing in God. There's a lot of you out there I happen to know because you've thanked me. But I forgot what I was about to say.
Oh no, brain fart.
Oh no, brain fart. Sorry.
It's fine. We'll have to go back and listen to it. Okay, so but you know, going back to you were talking about artists and writers in the culture war and the whole idea of criticizing women, and essentially it's going to be really tough because
that's what
fighting against
women really don't like. By the way, they really don't. But I'm sorry, they're going to have to deal with it because narcissistic female behavior is out of control.
Well, exactly. I was going to say it's basically just sort of like female behavior on steroids, because I think that there are women that are really sick of, you know, being pandered to, being treated like children. They want to genuinely make their own way, but the weakest among them and the men that want to fuck them are essentially the loudest voices right now, especially in the media. And I'm just putting it out there as it is, just what it is. Yeah. So I want to relate this to...
Wait a minute. Preference falsification. I hate to interrupt you, but preference falsification, Google it. It's when most people lie about what they think. I was saying one of them was about the God thing. There's a lot more theists and agnostics out there than atheists want to acknowledge. But also, this goes to other things. Feminism. Most people were never feminists. Everybody was afraid to say they weren't feminists because of what would happen. One of the great things we've all done, and Henry Badger Brigade's been part of it, has made it okay to be not a feminist. That's big. I mean, it's still not everywhere, right? But
yeah,
you can tell the liberals, especially, who most feminists are liberals, are really sulky about it. I mean, Pope Hat, Ken, what's his name, recently called me a neckbeard loser, which was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But you felt the need to acknowledge me, Mr. Mainstream Liberal, didn't you? Mm. And all he could do was insult me because he knows, just like everybody else who's looked at it knows, the men's rights position is almost always the scientifically, logically, ethically correct position. 9 times out of 10, nobody can disagree with us.
Yeah.
Which also means, though, by the way, that we're up against something that doesn't involve rationality, which means no matter how logical Karen Strawn or Allison Tiemann are, most people aren't going to get it.
Well,
because
it means seeing
they're
women
afraid.
as actual people, like as
Yes,
agents, that have opinions that don't just toe the line.
but if
And
you can subvert the culture
yeah,
and make
absolutely.
that okay, which is what artists and writers and poets and philosophers do, you can
Mhm.
make a dent. I mean, I still think we're going to be at this in 10 years. The question is, are we ready for that?
Yeah.
If you're into men's issues, are you in this for the long haul? And what's going to keep you here? Because all this shitting on us, you asked me when we started, is it getting better or are you imagining it? And I said the answer is yes, because the process of subverting the feminist narrative is working dynamite. It's working great. It's everywhere you look, there's somebody making fun of it, but there's still people putting on the brakes, and there's still people who don't want to hear about women who abuse and beat their children. They don't want to hear about female rapists. They don't want to hear about female criminals. They don't want to hear about men being destroyed in the family court system. They don't want to hear it. But part of it, I know because I've talked to them, is there's a preference falsification thing going on there too. They're afraid to say dads matter. They're afraid to say these things that sound conservative because you're afraid you might sound like a right winger. Stop being afraid of sounding like a right winger. Loving your dad is not a right wing thing. And all these things we talk about are not right wing, left wing things. So we need people who have the courage to say what they really think. And well, both the courage to say what they think, and sometimes it's even to think what they think. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Permission to think what you know you think. This is something that's very astute, and I think it also goes back to the preference falsification. You don't want to have a thought until somebody tells you it's okay. And this is where I think we sometimes go wrong in the men's rights movement. We assume gynocentrism is so big, we kind of start becoming reductionist, because it's true that sometimes a man will not think a thought until a woman tells him it's okay to think it. That is actually true. That's deep in the race. But what is also true is that there's sometimes a woman can't think a thought until a man tells her it's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we share. Human beings are complementary. Human beings can help each other, and including helping each other say it's okay to think this. It's okay to say this. That is really powerful. And when you are saying something that most people agree with but are afraid to say, sometimes you can give them the permission. And sometimes it has to be a man to tell you that, and sometimes it has to be a woman. That's just an is. But again, it goes back to why Honey Badger Radio is so important. And by the way, a voice for men, just as important. Anti-misandry forums, just as important. NCFM, just as important. Personally, I think maybe we want to be wrapping up here.
Yeah.
I'm getting tired.
Well, I
I'm going
have
to be
one
spending
last
a lot.
question.
Okay.
I have one last question for you. It's about the book. You have this book coming out that you talked about at length, but you also have one that you wrote before. And I thought it was, I looked it up before the show, and
Methuselah's Daughter?
Yeah, Methuselah's Daughter. And it's called Methuselah's Daughter. And I thought, I just read the little blurb. I want to read the blurb. Now, it's possible that I may get cut off while I'm trying to read this blurb. So if I do, just wait, I'll be right back. It's this weird Google thing. Okay, so is it pronounced Zalia? Zalia Marieko is a solitary immortal, very much the pagan barbarian at heart, but tempered by her centuries amongst a growing Christian influence in Western Europe. Her tale is by turns pathetic, endearing, unnerving, and horrifying as the reader witnesses her climb from nameless slave to terrifying goddess, and then her plunge into murderous insanity until she emerges humbled and remade, and all of this in just the first 1,500 years. So I just read that little bit, and I got to tell you that I actually find that really unique. As a person who is really interested in creating content myself, I've already started a book, and it's actually how I found my way to Honey Badger Radio when I tried to write a book about romance, or not write, but make a comic book about romance from a male perspective. And I got bombarded by feminists that were asking me why it's so important that we hear about what guys think. And I also have other things I want to do, but the reason why I found it interesting is because you are Well, if that blurb is correct, which is what I want to ask you about, you are presenting this character of Jalia as flawed, humble, like a variety of things, rather than the usually lazily written, one-dimensional girl power, let's not offend anyone, female archetype. So I guess what I want to ask you a little bit about is just the book in general, and if this is was a conscious choice that you made when writing this character, or if you were following something else that kind of dictated what her behavior was.
I'm extremely proud of that book. I have reason to believe Ariana Huffington herself scuttled it. It did not get the reviews I was expecting. A lot of people I was expecting to give it support were not. Everybody, 9 out of 10 people, including English professors and others I've given that book to, have come back with heavy praise and said it's very good. Some people, had mixed reactions, but I've gotten enormous praise for that book. I'm really proud of it. I don't know anybody who's really read it who didn't want to ask me about it. I'm really proud of Jalia and Methuselah's daughter. We didn't get to write volume 2. There is a gender issues exploration in the book, and yeah, the setup. I might as well tell you, spoilers, right? It's a 10-year-old book, but yeah, the hook is she's immortal. The bad side is she has no idea why at all. And just none, and it takes her even a few centuries to figure out that not only is she immortal, she's not killable, and what that would do to a person. And I loved writing her. By the way, she's a creation of my co-creator John Eddy, but she eventually kind of merged into our co-creation the way it went. But no, let's really explore it. And so we have her exploring her sexuality. We have her exploring motherhood, which is, by the way, something she can't do. She can't have children. She just keeps living. Sometimes through various parts in her endless life, she's very humble. She's a slave. Other times she just pretty much descends into nihilism. It's like, fuck it, I'm a goddess, and just starts killing and becomes a psycho. And eventually figures out that doesn't work either, and she becomes humbled and human. And God, that was an adventure writing that book. I learned things about myself writing that book, and I never got to write the sequel because there just wasn't market interest. So thank you for asking me about it. I'm really proud of that book.
Yeah, Allison read it, and she wanted to say from herself, she said, Corvus is awesome. She doesn't know why. She just thinks it's a great character. I guess it's from that book. So Corvus, yeah, that's her favorite character from the book.
But okay. Huh? I don't remember a character named Corvus. Are you sure? Is it the same?
She may have misspelled it. I don't know, but.
I remember she liked Rufus.
That might be the one that she's thinking about. Allison
Rufus is a character in the book who's a Roman patrician. Who's a he's a bastard, but she thought he was hot. It's typical girl.
Oh, that's gotta be it. She thought he was a bad boy.
Did it on purpose. Yeah. He was almost a romance novel villain. The way I wrote him, almost.
If he lived in the modern days, he would be doing what he'd be riding a crotch rocket and wearing like a biker.
Yes.
Grow his hair long and
exactly. Yeah. In fact, I'll tell her a little secret like that. He talks like Antonio Banderas. That's what gives them the weird lilt and how.
Yes. It's essentially the Gavin McGinnis, asshole archetype. So yeah. All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up, Dean. Okay. So I don't know if you have any final.
Yeah, I do have a few final thoughts.
Okay.
I know I've been dominating the conversation, but oh my God, I've spent 5 years on some of these issues that have been bugging me. The book I'm writing is called Letter to a Heathen Nation. The word heathen, if you look it up, people pretend it's this horrible word that you use to describe people to torture them to death. Not true. It's considered rude these days, but all it means is godless. You don't believe in any god or godless. Gods or god. Any god or the godless. You don't believe in any gods. That's all heathen means. And for thousands of years, people have written about what heathens are like. And it's interesting how not that much changed than people think. And so it's an answer to Sam Harris's book, Letter to a Christian Nation, where he says all kinds of things about Christians. This book is putting the anti-religion people on the back foot and making them defend their own shit, which they should be forced to do because they've been bullies. And they are part of this social justice cult, whether they want to admit it or not. And so if you go to deanesmay.com, where my blog is, most of the articles on there are early draft chapters of Letter to a Heathen Nation, educating people on what Orthodox Christianity looks like. And by the way, Orthodox Christians, if you include the Roman Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox, the Oriental Orthodox, the Assyrian Orthodox, even though they don't always get along with each other, they are in agreement 99% of the time against any form of Protestantism. And together, we're 80% of the world's Christians. And by the way, we're the ones being slaughtered, not the evangelicals here in the U.S. So that book is about that. I finally opened a Patreon. I hope I can plug that. I take Patreon and PayPal because I'm a disabled man who can't work like he used to.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you finally letting me talk about these things that have been bothering me. And I'm open to talk to them with anybody else who wants to know. By the way, that is the only type of evangelism Catholics are allowed to do, which is say, I'll answer your questions. That's the only kind we're allowed to do. So if you want to answer questions about the religion, you want questions about where the origin of the God concept was and why believing in God does not make you a Jesus freak, feel free. Look me up on Twitter, where I also have a microblog every day. Dean Esmay. That's all I got.
All right. Well, thanks, Dean, for coming on, and thank you guys for joining us. Obviously, I'm sure you have thoughts and opinions on everything we talked about. Just leave a comment. And yeah, so we will, I don't know what we're going to do next week yet, but thank you again, Dean, for making the time to come on. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time. If you have any emails, send them to topic@badgerpod.com. And please feed the badger. Patreon.com/honeybadgerradio.
Feed the badger. Feed the badger.